turmoil this Thursday night.
We are masters in our own home.
The Prime Minister's vow to protect Canadian workers and his message to the U.S. President.
We will build a new Canadian economy.
Busted where Canada's most wanted fugitive has been arrested. Dozens dead, hundreds falling ill. The new timeline to solve a medical mystery in New Brunswick.
This investigation is certainly different than the first one.
Why families are cynical. Plus, he's only 14 and stands more than 7 feet tall.
That's good.
The high hopes for this Quebec boy's future in basketball.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada's Prime Minister is promising to fight back against U.S. President Donald Trump's auto tariffs. Mark Carney says he'll speak with Donald Trump in the next day or two. He did not attack Trump directly today, but his message was clear.
I reject any attempts to weaken Canada, to wear us down, to break us so that America can own us. That will never happen.
Carney says in response to Trump's tariffs, nothing is off the table and that this is, in his view, the start of a negotiation. But he cautioned the road ahead will be difficult now that the U.S. is, as he says, no longer a reliable partner.
We must fundamentally reimagine our economy. The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over.
Our coverage begins with Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa.
A last-second return to Parliament led the Prime Minister to give a stark warning.
We will need to dramatically reduce our reliance on the United States. We will need to pivot our trade relationships elsewhere. Our economy.
Carney taking the morning off from the campaign trail to focus on the Americans, putting a 25% tariff on autos, promising a Canadian response, but only after Trump implements all of his tariffs on April 2nd.
It doesn't make sense when there's a series of U.S. initiatives that are going to come in relatively rapid succession. To respond to each of them, we're going to know a lot more in a week.
What Carney is willing or unwilling to do isn't clear, even saying an export tax on oil and gas is an option, something Alberta's premier has said could lead to an unprecedented national unity crisis.
And in a negotiation, it doesn't make sense to tip your hand and say what you're going to do going forward.
Carney toned down his usual Trump rhetoric in advance of a call set for the coming days with the president.
I will make clear to the president that those interests are best served by cooperation and mutual respect, including of our sovereignty.
But amped it back up in a rally in Montreal.
We've had another day, another unjust, pointless and irresponsible attack on Canada by President Trump.
An attack that Trump says is about moving jobs from Canada to the U.S.
Right now, a car would be made here, sent to Canada, sent to Mexico, sent all over the place. It's ridiculous.
But Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick contradicted his boss in conversations with International Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc and Ontario Premier Doug Ford.
He's reassuring us that there'll be no plant closures. My response was Ronald Reagan's response, trust but verify. We'll see what happens over the next little while.
Dealing with the tariffs gives Carney an opportunity to focus in on what he wants the ballot question to be. Who's best placed to deal with Donald Trump, Donna? And he'll continue that tomorrow when Carney has a meeting scheduled with the premiers.
Mackenzie Gray, thanks. Stocks in almost all auto companies tumbled today. The North American Big Three, Ford, Stellantis, and General Motors, are all down. Germany's Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz took a hit as well. Indexes for major automakers in Japan, South Korea, and India all fell too. There are exceptions. Shares in many electric vehicle makers went up, including Elon Musk's Tesla. Analysts warn the trade war could drive up the price of vehicles by thousands of dollars. North America's auto sector is so interdependent, the head of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association says the omelet can't be unscrambled. This rear assembly, as an example, is built with parts that come from Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Some of them cross the border multiple times before the vehicle is finished. Trump wants them all made in America. Jeff Semple looks at what that might mean.
Casey Vasudeva's auto parts plant has been in business for 50 years, but he worries its days are now numbered.
It's going to devastate the auto industry.
And I really feel sorry. I literally have tears in my eyes. What's going to happen to the auto workers?
Along with building brake lines, they're now pivoting to produce screwdrivers and pipe fittings to salvage the business.
We have to control our destiny.
Canada's auto industry employs and supports 500,000 jobs. More than 90% of our auto exports go to the U.S. And during production, a car part crosses the Canada-U.S. border up to 8 times.
To try and unravel decades of very deliberate policy to create an efficient supply chain is very difficult to do.
The 25% tariffs on April 3rd will hit completed vehicles entering the U.S., but auto parts made in North America will be spared for up to 90 days, while the White House figures out how to apply tariffs.
A car could be assembled in Oshawa, but have more U.S. content than a car that's assembled in Michigan. The U.S. administration is trying to assess how to measure U.S. content in vehicles.
In yet another twist on this tariff roller coaster, Ontario's premier revealed today that he's been told Canadian-made vehicles with 50% or more American parts won't face tariffs after all.
The union representing American auto workers welcomed Trump's tariffs, saying it marks the end of America's free trade disaster.
I ultimately think it's just misguided because we are successful together.
This is not an industry that is Donald Trump's to steal.
In Oshawa, home to GM and nicknamed Canada's Motor City, this story is getting old.
We've gone from anxious and somewhat nervous to we're sick of being antagonized, and we're becoming more defiant now.
Their message to politicians on both sides of the border.
We getting elbows up here, everybody?
Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
The NDP leader Jagmeet Singh shifted gears today. He made a last-minute decision to go to Windsor, Ontario, a city that depends heavily on the auto sector. Touria Izri is covering the NDP leader's campaign.
This is not where Jagmeet Singh planned to be or where these auto workers want to be. Standing here and defending their jobs against Donald Trump.
We can't believe the President of the United States is going to force us on unemployment.
The NDP leader was supposed to spend the day in London, but made an unexpected detour to Windsor to respond to the auto tariffs.
If you want to sell vehicles in our country while this trade war is going on, then you have to have a footprint in our countries.
Singh is vowing to ban companies from stripping Canadian car plants for parts and promised to waive the GST off cars made in Canada, as well as strengthen employment insurance.
You take auto out of Windsor, and then you look at all the other industries left, they're all going to die.
Thanks, brother.
NDP candidate and longtime Windsor MP Brian Massey says this city needs the country's help.
We cannot let one person tear down our environment, our economies, and decades of work.
Canadians got to stick together. And I'm telling you, I'm tired of hearing oil versus auto. We're all being tariffed.
The auto tariffs are adding a layer of uncertainty in Windsor and unpredictability on the campaign trail. The leader's plans and policy announcements are being derailed by the decisions of one man. Donna?
Touria Izri in Windsor, Ontario, thanks. The federal Conservative leader's campaign was overtaken by Trump's tariffs, too. Pierre Poilievre's challenge is to carve out a response that sets him apart from Mark Carney and at the same time make election promises that he hopes will appeal to voters. Today's was a promise to increase the limit on tax-free savings accounts by $5,000, but with conditions. David Akin is following the Conservative campaign.
Like every campaigning party leader, Pierre Poilievre started the day taking aim at Donald Trump.
My message to President Trump is knock it off. Stop attacking America's friends.
Liberal and NDP leaders altered their itineraries in response to Trump's latest tariff threat, but not Poilievre, who came to this steel products plant on the front lines of Trump's tariff war in a community 50 kilometers from the U.S. border.
We will never be the 51st state, but we can once again be friends with the United States if the president reverses course on these disastrous tariff threats.
In the meantime, Poilievre put forward a new policy proposal that responds in part to rising economic nationalism on both sides of the border. Poilievre promises to boost the maximum contribution to tax-free savings accounts from $7,000 a year to $12,000 a year, but with a catch. That extra $5,000 a year that you're putting in your TFSA must be invested in Canadian companies to support Canadian jobs.
It's time to put Canada first for a change. Instead of rewarding elites who take jobs abroad, we need to reward patriotic Canadians who bring their investment home.
It was the Conservatives who introduced the TFSA back in 2008, and they've become incredibly popular. Nearly 19 million Canadians have one, and that represents more than half of all tax filers. Now, Poilievre needs to do some campaigning here in the Lower Mainland, because unless the Conservatives can win more seats here, Pierre Poilievre will not be Prime Minister. Donna.
David Akin in Coquitlam, BC. Thanks. President Trump has threatened to impose far larger tariffs on the European Union and Canada if they work together to combat what he is doing. The U.S. is Europe's biggest export market, and European leaders are voicing sharp criticism of Trump's move. Redmond Shannon is looking at that part of the story.
No European country is likely to feel the impact of Trump's automotive tariffs more than the home of Mercedes, BMW and Volkswagen.
Unsere kanadische Kollegin
Germany's foreign minister said her Canadian counterpart Melanie Joly put it best, that these tariffs are just a de facto tax on Americans. The coordinated outlook is perhaps why Donald Trump took to social media just before 2 a.m, warning Europe and Canada not to work together to harm the US.
We're a sovereign nation. We take our own decisions.
Mark Carney's proposals to remove Canada's internal trade barriers indicate a desire to follow the lead of the EU's single market.
Why is Donald Trump targeting Canada and Europe so explicitly? I think it's clear that they are top of his mind in terms of the global economies.
This trade analyst says along with its own retaliatory tariffs, the EU is considering getting creative in the way Canadian provinces have banned US liquor, hitting back where it hurts.
A lot of digital services companies are very close to the White House, and the idea there is so basically how to retaliate on that area rather than on traditional tariffs.
Donc c'est pas cohérent. French President Emmanuel Macron says it's not coherent to impose tariffs while demanding Europe increase its defence spending. While Europe's car industry stresses that it makes more vehicles inside the US than it exports to the US, supporting many American jobs. But those vehicles rely on imported parts too, which are also subject to the proposed tariffs. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The Trump administration is making sweeping cuts to health, cutting 10,000 federal workers in the Health and Human Services Department. U.S. Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants to reshape the agency, which handles oversight on medical care, food and drugs. Candace Cole explains the impact the drastic reduction could have on Americans.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has vowed to reshape U.S. public health agencies and make America healthy again. To do it, he plans to lay off 10,000 federal employees.
This will be a painful period for HHS as we downsize from 82,000 full-time employees to around 62,000.
The Department of Health and Human Services oversees critical supports for Americans like Medicare, Medicaid, and even provides breakfast for school children. The deep cuts to public health come as measles outbreaks worsen. Kennedy, a known vaccine skeptic, has been pushing alternative treatments like erythromycin and cod liver oil. But doctors say these are not cures, and in some cases, children have shown signs of liver damage after being given too much cod liver oil.
The actions we've seen coming out of this administration since the beginning is really thwarting the work that many agencies like HHS, but also global organizations like the World Health Organization play in helping to combat global disease threats.
As the Trump administration slices through federal institutions like HHS, it's also cutting funding to help vaccinate millions of children around the world in places that don't have access to adequate health care.
This decision, if followed through with, is not only going to lead to an uptick in disease and death, it's also going to pose, security risks here in the United States and in countries like our allies.
Earlier this week, the Trump administration cut over $11 billion in COVID funding allocated to state and local health departments, putting a halt on efforts to stop other emerging outbreaks, including measles. Donna?
Candace Cole in Washington. Thanks, Candace. The measles outbreak in Canada is also growing. Ontario is now reporting more than 570 cases. More than 100 of those happened in the past week. Most are in unvaccinated children. 6 other provinces are dealing with smaller outbreaks. Canada's most wanted man has been arrested in Europe. Dave Turmel was arrested in Italy. Police believe the 28-year-old is the leader of the Blood Family Mafia, a notorious Quebec street gang. Turmel has been wanted since 2023 for several charges, including drug trafficking, conspiracy, and assault with a weapon. Tragedy in the Red Sea. Coming up, the tourist submarine that sank and what's known about the victims. In Egypt, 6 people, including 2 children, have died after a tourist submarine sank in the Red Sea. It was carrying 50 people. It's believed all the dead are Russian nationals. It's not clear what caused the sub to sink. The tourism company's website says it can dive 25 meters, allowing people to view underwater marine life. Ukraine's president, unable to rely on America's support, got the backing of 31 other countries today, including NATO allies and EU member states. France is pledging $3 billion in military aid. President Emmanuel Macron is also promising to forge ahead with Britain on plans to deploy troops as a reassurance force to deter future Russian aggression. French and British soldiers are not intended to be peacekeeping forces and would not replace Ukrainian troops on the front line, though not all countries agree with it, and details are expected to be finalized in the coming weeks. Volodymyr Zelensky says he appreciates the support, but still needs security guarantees and for all sanctions on Russia to stay in place. King Charles was briefly hospitalized today after what the palace says was scheduled and ongoing medical treatment for cancer. A statement said the king was experiencing temporary side effects that required a short period of observation in hospital. He's now back at his London residence, Clarence House, and has cancelled all engagements for tomorrow. Last year, the 76-year-old had been undergoing treatment for an enlarged prostate when an undisclosed form of cancer was diagnosed. Waiting for answers ahead, the mysterious illness that's plagued hundreds in New Brunswick for years. There's a medical mystery in New Brunswick. Since 2019, 39 people have died after showing neurological symptoms. There hasn't been much progress in figuring out what it is. And as Heidi Petrachik explains, a renewed effort is underway to try to figure it out.
So we have not left the fight.
In January 2019, Tim and Jill Beatty's father, Laurie, began suffering neurological symptoms that defied diagnosis, and he died less than 5 months later. After his family heard about other cases in New Brunswick, they took up the push for answers.
There was a pattern. There were similarities.
In 2022, the then Conservative provincial government said its investigation found no evidence of a common illness and work ground to a halt. But cases kept popping up, nearly 400 in total. Susan Holt's government promised to reopen the investigation after its election last fall.
So this investigation is certainly different than the first one.
After gathering more patient information like test results, the province's chief medical officer says there's now enough data to do a deeper dive into roughly half the cases, probing concerns flagged by the reporting physician about elevated levels of environmental substances.
The two that were specifically raised to our attention or brought to our attention were heavy metals and pesticides.
Specifically, broad-spectrum herbicides used in agriculture and forestry. The province will share its final analysis with the Public Health Agency of Canada first, then the public this summer.
This is smelling like and feeling like the same culture of dismissal.
We need to start testing water. We need to start testing shellfish. We need to start testing wildlife.
The Beatties want federal officials to take over the investigation into the illness that has changed their lives and the lives of hundreds more. The province says it's taking the lead for now. Heidi Petrachik, Global News, Halifax.
Rising star next, the Quebec teen with a huge head start in basketball. Imagine being 14 years old and standing 7 feet 4 inches tall. That's where Jeremy Goyer is at, and he is still growing. The Quebecer has already caught the attention of professional basketball. Hardly surprising, he's already as tall as the tallest player in the NBA. Mike Armstrong introduces us to the young man with the world at his feet.
There is one part of basketball you can't teach: height. And that's something Jeremy Goyer has. You can see it when he palms a basketball. Yes, it's full size. Goyer took up the game at 6 years old. Before, he started towering over everyone, including his coaches. He tried out the game, he says, for fun at first, and fell in love with it.
Good job, good work. When I was playing, I was like, yo, this sport's actually on. Like, I want to play more. So I started playing more and more and more.
Videos of Goyer started going viral last fall when he attended a basketball camp in the U.S. He had some calling his height a cheat code, as he dominated to the point it was hard not to feel bad for his fellow 13-year-olds on the court. His coach back in Montreal says ever since, his phone's been ringing off the hook.
I've called from coach from Europe to United States, all over the way, even from Russia sometimes.
What the hell is in the water up there?
Now, the other thing that's turned heads in the basketball world is a certain trend. The tallest player in the NBA right now is Canadian Zach Edey with the Grizzlies. He's 7'4". Then there's Canadian Olivier Rioux in college with Florida. He's 7'9", which then leaves Goyer, 7'4" already, and still getting bigger.
So, what's going on in Canada, eh?
Now, the other thing Goyer has going for him, according to his coach, is his work ethic. He's putting in about 25 hours a week on the court. He knows his height helps, but he won't get where he wants to go, the NBA, without the work. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Osoyoos, BC, White Lake, Ontario, and Kananaskis, Alberta. Keep them coming. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Jeff Semple will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.